Fellow Reddit users, what is the worst thing that you have discovered that you regret finding? I found a tape of a woman being killed. I was at my grandmother's house, helping her move furniture around. She became my mother figure after the death of my mother when I was a young child, and I had been staying with her ever since my car accident. My grandmother helped nurse me back to health, so I made an effort to alleviate her of any and all physical tasks. I felt it was the least I could do. It was in the attic when I accidentally knocked over a box. The box was filled with VHS tapes, with the farthest dating back to 1990. All that was written on them was the year. There was a TV in the attic as well because we used the attic as more like a functioning room than a storage space. So I decided to play the oldest tape. I expected to see happy memories, home videos, scenery, anything other than this. The video started with whoever was holding the camera filming a woman sitting alone at a small table at a coffee shop. She was reading. The camera was zoomed in on her hair glowing in the light. Fixed, the tape then skipped to a new setting in what looked like downtown Chicago somewhere. I could see the back of the same woman from before, walking down the street, oblivious to the person trailing and filming behind her. The sky was now a dark gray, and I could see lights from passing cars glinting off her shiny boots. The camera was clambering and rubbing up against the jacket of the cameraman. He or she wasn't far from her, but was far enough away to show that he or she wasn't with her, clearly stalking her. The scene lasted maybe 5 minutes of monotonous walking until it shifted to the woman now bound and stowed in the trunk of a car. She was taped up, unable to speak. All I could hear was the sound of heavy rainfall accompanied by her screaming and crying. Her muffled panic broke my heart in two. My spine became frozen, and I couldn't open my eyes any wider. At any moment, the film could shift to something so much more grotesque, so morbid, so life-changing, and I could do nothing but watch in horror. I saw a black gloved hand sprout from behind the camera and slam the trunk door closed, trapping her inside. It was now clearly night. The next scene skipped to the woman, now beaten and bloody while tied to a chair. The location looked to be a warehouse somewhere. The only light came from a single fluorescent bulb above the woman, illuminating pools of crimson-red blood at her feet. The camera was steadily held, so much that it seemed to be propped up by a stand. I could hear the poor woman moaning in pain underneath the tape covering her mouth. I could also hear something shifting around on the concrete, like someone adjusting their stance. It seemed manic. I could hear the clambering of metal, like tools being packed or unpacked from a bag. My stomach now fully turned. The stalker then walked into frame, showing only his back. His head was completely covered in a balaclava. He carried a blade in his right hand. My heart completely halted. The stalker held her drooping head up, tilt her face upward, and began to slice her throat from her left ear all the way to the right. She squirmed and gargled in her desperate and useless attempt to survive. I had never seen so much blood in my life. The killer then took off his mask and stared into the camera, flashing a toothy grin. The film then abruptly stopped. I was held in place by my now shot nerves. My blood slowed into stillness, completely discoloring my body into an almost corpse-like white. My grandmother was watching me. She, shakingly, tried to console me from across the room, struggling to form words through the river of tears streaming down her face. She said she didn't want me to ever be reminded of who I was before my accident. About 2 years ago, I was driving home from a family reunion pretty late at night, and the drive was about 2 hours. I didn't stay the night because I had to be back for work the following day. Most of the drive was on roads with dense bushes and trees on either side, the real creepy ones you see a lot in movies. Anyway, I had been driving about 45 minutes, and I was starting to get really tired. You know how sometimes you just suddenly become really tired out of nowhere? Well, yeah, that happened to me. I knew I wasn't going to last, but I didn't come across any place that I felt I could park and safely sleep. Anyway, after it became clear to me that I wasn't going to find a place to pull up and my tiredness wasn't going away, I did something very questionable. I pulled over to the side of the road onto the grass behind some bushes to try and hide my car from anybody else who was going to come past. The roads weren't empty. I came across another car every few minutes or so. I made a mental note that the time was 11:22 and then fell asleep. Sometime later, I was awoken by a scratching sound. I looked at the clock to 11:50. The sound stopped after a few seconds, and because I was still extremely tired, I didn't bother looking around and simply went back to sleep. I was later awoken by the same sound, and it was now 12:40. This time it really freaked me out because the sound didn't stop. The thought ran across my mind that it was just an animal inspecting the car, but why would it return almost an hour after it had left the previous time? I looked in my rearview mirror and just managed to catch a glimpse of something running away into the forest. Now, at the time, I thought it was the damn hook killer, you know, the one that scratched that couple's car and then slaughtered the guy when he got out to investigate. Screw that, I thought to myself, so I got the hell out of there. There was a bend no more than 100 yards up the road, and as I came around it, there was a fucking car parked off to the side of the road with the driver's side door opened. I slowed down just to look to see if anyone was in there. There wasn't. Then I looked in my rearview mirror. I didn't see anything, and all of a sudden, this guy comes sprinting around the corner. He starts screaming at me, shouting stuff like, Hey you, get the fuck out of your car now." I noped the fuck out of there and sped off. I never saw the guy again. Moral of the story: don't sleep on the side of a deserted road.